So depending on what you want to do with your data, once you get into Chromeleon 7, there may be one or two different steps that you'll need to go through. The first one is basic import so that you can archive your data and actually view it in the future. The second is converting the data to Chromeleon 7 data and then to be able to manipulate that data once it's been converted, and to also be able to access all the different features and tools that Chromeleon 7 offers. All the major files from Chromeleon 6 can be imported into Chromeleon 7, so things like sequence files, PGM files, the quant files, the report definition files, and audit trails. One thing to note about this, however, is that once it is transferred over to Chromeleon, whether it's imported or converted, it can't be brought back to Chromeleon 6. So importing data into Chromeleon 7 is not unlike any other program that allows import of data. We have two different options. One is import of single CMV files, and the other is bulk import, essentially. So you can import multiple CMV files. The first is accessible, or actually both of them are accessible from the file menu. So you click File, Import, and then Chromeleon Data, or bulk import as necessary. And with the bulk import option, you'll get a dialog that gives you the option to select a given folder. And that way you can import 3 CMBO files, 10, 100, however many you have in that folder. So the other route to getting Chromeleon 6 data transferred over to Chromeleon 7 is only available in Windows 7 environments. So if you have Chromeleon 6 installed on a Windows 7 PC, and then you install Chromeleon 7 on top of it, you can then see the data that's available in Chromeleon 6. And of course, in a lot of instances these days, that's not going to be an option just because Windows 7 has been discontinued. That being said, if you are in that environment, when you do install Chromeleon 7, what you'll see in the navigation bar here to the left in this image is the Chromeleon 7 data vault, which is called Chromeleon Local, and has a yellow icon next to it. And then below that, you'll see my Chromeleon 6 CMCD, or CM_CD data source. And within that, you'll see the folders and the sequences and other data, all grayed out with the lock overlay icon on it. And this identifies this data as the Chromeleon 6 data. So it's readily identifiable when you have it in the Chromeleon 7 console. And when I click on one of the sequences, you'll then see on the right-hand side in the injection list that you get all the mini plots, so you can see the chromatograms. You can see the type of sample it is. You can see the instrument method that was used. You can see the processing method that was used. You get all the different data that's been imported into Chromeleon 7, or sorry, is accessible via Chromeleon 7. And you can actually open each individual injection up and look at the data, look at how it was, how the peaks were integrated, and so on. And then below, you'll have the associated files with it. So you can actually, this is the individual files of the processing method, the instrument method, the report definition file, and any PDFs that you've added on in your Chromeleon 6 data. Now, given that most people aren't going to stay in a Windows 7 environment into perpetuity, probably it's not best to just leave your data in the data sources, in the Chromeleon 6 data sources. You can still do that, but it's probably best to bring it into your Chromeleon 7 installation. And if you do have access to those data sources, you can simply drag and drop that data into the Chromeleon 7 data vault. And as you can see in this image here, where we're taking that same sequence, dragging it from the Chromeleon 6 data source into the Chromeleon 7 data vault. Once that data has been dragged and dropped into the Chromeleon 7 data vault, it's now an archived data, essentially. It's still accessible. You can look at it as we looked at in the last slide. You can look at all the information associated with it. And so you've now imported that data from Chromeleon 6 into Chromeleon 7. And it's identified by the icon that you can see there within that box. There's a little icon that shows, that, for example, the sequence. It has a blue truck overlay on it that identifies it as an imported sequence. If you then look to the right, you can see the sequence control bar that's highlighted in blue, and it says imported on it. There's also a convert button. And this identifies that this sequence is in that archive state, essentially. So there are several things that you need to be aware of when importing or copying data to Chromeleon 7. First is all of the original processing results and methods are brought in and displayed by default. The second is that you can use some Chromeleon 7 tools to actually work with the data, whether if you want to view the data or if you want to query the data for a specific sample or sample type. You can do that across sequences just like you would with any other Chromeleon 7 data. And then you can also report on any of the data that came over with the Chromeleon 6 import. And then finally, the one important thing to pay attention to is that you cannot edit the sequence or the processing method at all. So you can't reprocess the data. In order to do that, you have to convert the data, and we'll talk about that in the coming slides. So if you're interested in exposing the data to the tools or the full tool set within Chromeleon 7, maybe you want to reprocess the data, so you want to reintegrate the peaks, or you want to make changes to the detection parameters, that type of thing. The data then needs to be converted. And it's a simple one-step process. Basically, you select your the data that you're looking to convert. You hit that convert button that we saw on the previous slide, and it converts it over to Chromeleon 7 data. And just like the regular import, converted data or imported then converted data is easily identifiable. You can see on the right-hand side again in the navigation pane that the sequence icon has this time a gray truck overlay on it. And to the right in the sequence control bar, you'll again see it's highlighted in blue. It says, in this case, imported. It does not have that button there. So there's no option to convert it. So it's easy to tell which data has been converted and which has not. So for the data conversion, there's also things that the user needs to be aware of. When the data is converted, it does bring over a set of the peak detection results, but it may not include everything because as the technologies have changed both in the operating system and in Chromeleon itself, doing a direct conversion becomes a lot more difficult. So one example of this is we use the Chromeleon 6 data to reanalyze the peaks that you bring over via data conversion. It's the same exact algorithm as in Chromeleon 6, however, it's based on the new technology that's available for Chromeleon 7. And that means that there will be slight differences in the detection and maybe even the integration of those peaks. So you need to keep an eye on that if you decide to convert the data. Some other examples of things that change as you convert the data. The device views that were available in Chromeleon 6 are not available in Chromeleon 7, and only the script view is available for the instrument method file or the program file. There are several types of data that can't be converted either. So you have the post-acquisition steps and nested triggers. They cannot be converted. Neither can mass spec data, and that's not necessarily a method or data that's associated directly with the method, but rather that's the actual data, mass spec data. For the quant files or the processing methods, things have moved, so you'd access them differently in Chromeleon 7 than you do in Chromeleon 6. And they may be treated differently. One example is the maximum peak height. It's not supported in Chromeleon 7 at all. So those peaks that are detected based on that value are ignored. But Chromeleon 7 will tell you that it's been ignored so that you're aware of where it's changed. For the report files, in Chromeleon 7, it's a better idea not to have tables next to each other, so side by side, but rather one on top of the other. And this is because the tables in the report files are dynamic. So if you're looking at the sequence in a table, if you have a sequence that's 10 injections, and then for the next report you're looking at one that's 100 injections, the tables automatically adjust to that size. You couldn't do that in Chromeleon 6, and therefore having the tables side by side was fine. But in Chromeleon 7, you can do it, you can put them side by side, but it's a better idea not to for that reason. And of course, throughout Chromeleon, the terminology has changed for a number of things. And so in audit trail messages, you may see differences. We've already talked a lot about Chromeleon 6 data sources and Chromeleon 7 data vaults. That's one example of the terminology changing. As you can see, importing data from Chromeleon 6 to Chromeleon 7 is quite easy to do. You can do it via single file or bulk import. You can do it via the drag and drop method, obviously, which is only available in Windows 7 environments. You can also view data directly in the Chromeleon 6 data source. This is also in Windows 7 environments, if you choose to do so. But in most cases, I believe that most of you will be importing that data into Chromeleon 7, and you can do the same there. The data will be exactly the same as it is in Chromeleon 6. Now, you can go one step further, and you can convert that data as well. If you decide to do that, obviously the calculations change, and there's certain things that change within the different files. But you will then have access to Chromeleon 7 tools, and you can extend sequences that you've run in Chromeleon 6 and that type of thing. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention.